Innovation and Disruptive Technologies, Impact on Businesses and Society in Asia.
So, I am just exceptionally excited for this panel. I'll be your host today, Megan Nilsson. I go by Crypto Megan. We've been discussing some really cool topics, and we will be going over today innovation and disruptive technologies and the impact on business and society in Asia. So we got a lot of cool perspectives for you. But first, I'd like to do a roundtable, allow my panelists to introduce themselves. We can start with you, Amir.
Well, thank you very much, Megan. Everybody, good morning. My name is Amir. I'm from SINOFY. We have a fantastic team here. We have VC firm out of Shanghai with offices in Singapore, Dubai, and New York City. We are always looking for infrastructure projects and partners. After my talk, if you have free time, come over to say hello. Happy to chat more.
Thank you. Jasmine?
Good morning, everyone. Hi, my name is Jasmine. So I have, a few startups, but I'll talk about two. 365DB Consortium is a Web3 advisory that helps businesses reimagine their current processes if they want to look at Web3 space to expand their business and new revenue channel. And Endgame, which is a game development company. Our current focus is helping businesses gamify their approach to customers. Happy to catch up later after this if you want to know more.
Thank you, Jasmine. James?
Hello, everyone. My name is James from CloudMile. We are doing cloud, data, and AI. And we have office here in Philippines, but headquarters in Taiwan, Hong Kong, Singapore, Malaysia, Indonesia, and Vietnam. We have a booth over there at the end of the hall. So feel free to have a chat with us.
Thank you. And in order to kick this panel off, since we have such a diverse background here on this panel, and a fun fact, they all speak Chinese, two speak Mandarin, one speaks Cantonese, we're going to give you a brief history lesson to set the tone on innovation and disruptive technologies in Asia. And I'm going to allow Amir to kick that off. Amir?
Oh, thank you. Well, before yesterday, I was watching the news how Henry Kissinger, who is 100 years old, went to China to discuss the current situation, what is happening between the Americans and the Chinese around Taiwan. In 1971, Henry Kissinger opened a new chapter between the Americans and the Chinese. From 1971 and onwards, China transformed itself multiple times. Number one, China became manufacturing hub for the world. Number two, within 50 years, the China, which was declining economy, turned into the world's second largest economy. And number three, they have a new strategy to stay away from made in China into innovated in China. And I lived in Shanghai for 5 years. The civilization, the products and tech, everything what I experienced, I believe China or Asia Pacific or East Asia by definition, 10 years ahead of the Europe and the US combined. I could go on forever, but you guys have some more to share.
Okay. Yeah, maybe because I'm Taiwanese, so I was trying to stay away a little bit from those topics. Let's go back to a little bit about the technologies. If you are old enough, you might heard about a product called DVD. And if you are even older enough, you might heard the product called VCD. Think about the roughly 20 years ago in China, they actually jumped from you cannot buy a VCD player in China. You can only buy a DVD player. That's why we call innovation has a huge impact in Asia. Because in the Asia, I think a lot of people jump around. I mean, they skip a lot of innovation process. They skip a lot of the try and error process. For example, the iGaming industries, a lot of people here, they're using cloud instead of on-prem services or IDC services. So leverage the new technologies, new innovations did help or make a lot of impact in Asia.
So I want to touch a little bit about how China has leapfrogged. And not just China, there are other parts of ASEAN that is totally leapfrogging a lot of financial services. In China, it is cashless. You want to give money to the beggar, you do a QR code scan and give him money through digital means. And they are probably the largest and the first country to truly go cashless. All because they started innovating back in the 90s. 1994 is when Alibaba first started. Now today they have WeChat Pay, WeChat Wallet, and you go into China with your yuan, that paper money, they're going to look at you with disgust. Truly, you can try it. Now, in places like Cambodia, they are also leapfrogging things like ATM machine because it costs a lot of money to transport cash from one branch in Cambodia to another branch. So they are totally looking and already leapfrogging that. So payment wallet is the rave in places like Cambodia. They never really needed to implement an ATM network. So that's what's happening in terms of tech disruption and innovation in businesses and society. So imagine if you were a generation that never had to deal with paper money. You won't even understand what coins mean. You won't have broken pocket because there was too much change.
So that's really interesting. And coming from the US myself and seeing that innovation is being stifled or, making it difficult for innovation to happen, let's say, I think it's interesting the reason why Asia Pacific is light years ahead in terms of innovation and tech and what you referenced to going from being made in China to innovated in China. Why, has Asia had that kind of advance in technology while the Western world or other parts of the world are kind of just catching up now? Like, we're just seeing these incredible innovations now in the US, some of them, and in Europe. What's going on there? And one thing I wanted to set the tone with is I did a podcast with 𝐉𝐤𝐬𝐬, the co-founder of Animoca Brands. And he was one of the first internet providers in Hong Kong called Hong Kong Online. And so his vision is really interesting to me. And he said, going by the crypto and the Web3 and that whole ethos of ownership, that Americans really don't understand ownership and they take it for granted. And Asia doesn't. They understand those concepts more. Can you touch a little bit more on why Asia Pacific has been able to have these advances much more than in the other parts of the world?
Well, I could give, from my perspective as a foreigner, I want to start out with the Eric Schmidt, a Google former CEO, gave a good talk when he was with Henry Kissinger. The first one, what Henry said, when the Europeans solved a problem, they look at the problem as the whole. But when the Chinese solve the problem, smaller problem is the part of the bigger problem, which leads to something what I'm going to talk about. So China is the only country that was able to export its innovation outside. There is China's firewall, there is Chinese internet. You spoke about Chinese payment, be it the Tencent, be it the Alibaba, be it the Baidu. These are the three giants on top of which everything is built in China in terms of infrastructure. And ByteDance, by far, has reinvented the idea of social media. Everyone is using TikTok. And the reason that I believe why Asia Pacific and China are on the forefront here, there is the adoption, which is huge, consumption, which is huge, and people are always hungry for new innovation. Whereas from my perspective, North America and European Union are stagnated by the fact that they are well developed already. There is no need. They export the innovation as in a concept. But in terms of execution and adoption, Asia Pacific is one of the frontiers. And that is the reason that why we're based in Shanghai. That is the reason why we travel across Asia Pacific. And a number of hustlers, entrepreneurs, people that dare to challenge is a lot more comparing with the Europeans or the North Americans that we get to know.
It's interesting that you say out of necessity, because one of the things that 𝐉𝐤𝐬𝐬 told me in the podcast was that he was working for AT&T at the time, helping them with the infrastructure of the internet, but only to power his other startups. So it's like finding solutions to these problems and not just seeing the problem as a whole, and coming up with these ideas out of the necessity to want to innovate and push forward and drive forward. Jasmine, can you continue about, I want to know why, so we were discussing before that the companies, the tech companies, they work more in tandem with the government rather than in countries like the US, where the US has its own agenda and tech companies are kind of working on the side and they're trying to find some kind of intermedium. Does this have anything to do with why they're able to advance so quickly?
So one of the things about Asian culture specifically is we are very community driven. And even until now, you will see that families stay together, not just on one generation, minimally 2, sometimes 3, and if great-grandma is still around, 4 generations in one household. Now, because of things like that, we look at a problem not to challenge authority for the sake of challenging authority, but we look at a problem to resolve the problem for our community. And the government is there. Everybody's mindset is the government is actually the parent. If you speak to a Chinese national, 政府, which is actually dad, almost, right? So that's how they view the government, and the government takes on that kind of role like caretaker. So when you think about it that way, then you want to work with the authority to resolve actual community, society issues. And that's why innovation like TikTok, Baidu, Tencent, JD, all these guys come up because they want to resolve a problem on the ground, not challenge authority just because they think that there is a need for freedom or individual expression. For them, it's all about practical living and a fuss-free living to a great extent.
So it sounds like what we discussed, that there needs to be some kind of healthy intermediate, like medium ground, right?
Yes.
Meeting halfway.
Definitely. And when people understand, so there is a lot of trust to some extent between the people and the government. They do trust the government. Whatever we see outside here in the media, when you go into China, and Amir will be able to tell you this, they actually do, to a large extent, trust their government.
That's the good example. If I could jump in real quick. In China, there is the very famous festival called 1111, meaning Singles Day. And just to give a good example, I remember watching doing the shopping myself. This is the day when everybody goes online to buy the stuff. And people don't spend their capital on promoting their products. If I'm the seller, they find the authority in the industry, what we call the influencer today, to convince people to buy, to the point that it's a tradition and culture-driven sort of country, specifically in Asia, whereas in Europe, in North America, it's more logic-driven culture. And I think the idea of connecting people together, looking at tradition and culture, empowered internet companies to adopt even faster. Whereas in Europe or in North America, you have to convince every single person showing the benefits of a product. So I think these are the interesting, so what I remember right now, findings, anthropologically speaking, that made it interesting for me to remain in China for 5 years.
Right, and going back to that concept of ownership and taking it for granted, and since in America we already have that concept of ownership and the Constitution and things like that. I mean, the gamers, a lot of them are saying that they don't need to own their skins. They don't want to own their stuff. They don't like it. Why do we have to do this? So I see like a whole difference in mentality between, the two worlds. So I think that's really interesting. James, how is it on your side of the world?
I think I can use another perspective to see this. I think that let's see about data. Let's say at the very beginning or at the end of the day, it's about data. In China or in Asia Pacific or in Asia, data is huge because of the population, because of the transition. People are very active in the social medias. And talking about data, let's see how many countries in Asia, they have the Personal Data Act. How soon or how late they have a Personal Data Act. And this make a huge contribution in a way. So either government or either companies or even, the players, operators, they have tons of data. Because of the data, they can do everything. Prediction, recommendations, and then that's why AI or machine learning kind of very hard in Asia, or even some innovation is even more advanced than the people in the States. Because the data here is cheaper, is more accessible, is more, I would say, less control in a way. So that also make a huge differences and also make how Asians or Asian market grow so fast in a way, in my opinion.
Well, I want to give an example about the, at least based on my observations, after 1989 Tiananmen Square situation, the government's objective was, what does it take to control the huge population? And the idea was, remove the concept of privacy. As long as you are in China as a foreigner or national, they know everything about you, whether you want it or you don't. You don't want it, you can leave the country. That's number one. And number two, think about controlling 1 billion number of people. It could cost different ethnicities, different regions, different cultures, different religions. if there's anything that could disrupt the one small region, the way it happens in India, for example, Myanmar right now, or in Arab countries, or Arab Spring is an example, I think the governments, particularly in China, they'll learn their lessons and do whatever it takes, apply technology to control the societies. And they're doing a good job. For example, in Shanghai, to my best knowledge, across the entire city, there were 250,000 cameras that watch you, what I call the big brother watching you. So on one hand, it's security measures. On one hand, it's the controlling of society. But on the other hand, do I want to become part of this Orwellian society? I'm not sure, but there is a business. There is a huge capital. There is the number of inflowing, what we call the FDAs, foreign direct investments. And that's the reason why China has become the second largest economy. And yesterday we spoke about Deng Xiaoping, how he reinvented the concept of marriage between the capital world and communist world and made China as we know it today. And by far, I don't know any other country, a communist country, that is successful and successfully or not successfully dealing with the European or NATO or North American counterparts. And everyone is taking China seriously now.
That's really interesting. I mean, it's kind of like a catch-22, you know, the part about being controlled that has possibly been the reason why so much innovation has happened because of the flow of data and the access to that data. But, you know, you have to choose one or the other and whether or not to be a part of that. And it's very interesting, the whole inner workings of why the innovation happens faster. But the fact is that it does. And it has to do a lot with the history and with the way the society is run. And I find that interesting that maybe in other countries like America, they're more focused on other things, like challenging authority, like, you know, the other side of the spectrum. So maybe they don't get things done as quickly as other countries may do it. So that's interesting. I'd like to shift gears a little bit and talk about the disruptive tech in Asia and how have countries been using that disruptive tech to revolutionize society. What about, can we start with you, Jasmine, on how have they used innovative tech to disrupt the Philippines? How have they been using that here?
So in Philippines, over the pandemic, everybody knows that play to earn blew up. Everybody knew that because of the lockdown, you can't go out, you can't do your business, you can't go to work, you may not have an income. But you can go online and play this game. And it's not a very nice game to play, by the way. Axie Infinity is a bit of a grind if you play the game. But you can go in and you can get in and earn tokens by playing the game. And it's a game that just takes a lot of time. Time that you have over a pandemic that you had to sit at home and do nothing but earn income. And this income came in the form of US dollars, which was great for a lot of people who couldn't go out and earn. And so that really helped people rethink what blockchain can bring from a perspective of disrupting revenue channels. You don't have to be physically present now to participate in an activity that will create an income for you and your family. And that was huge. That was really huge.
Yeah, and I think that's interesting. Again, going back to why I asked 𝐒𝐿𝐬𝐬, the co-founder of Animoca Brands, who's like investing in games worldwide and has the presence in Hong Kong and has that perspective, why do gamers not like this? Why are traditional gamers pushing back? He goes, no, it's only an American narrative. And I really didn't realize that. And he said, actually, what they fear in America is digital capitalism, and that the one thing that they believe is fair and equitable may be taken away from them by those who can come in and spend a lot. But it's not right, it's not true, because you don't have to spend a lot and you can participate in many different ways. But he says that they have this innate fear that actually, they did a poll in America and 60% of young Americans under 30 actually prefer socialism to capitalism because capitalism has not served them in the way that they have wanted it to. So it's interesting that in other countries in the world, like Philippines and in Asia, they actually have really embraced that, and that's something that's empowering to them, which is what it is meant to be. Right? So I find that very, very interesting. Yeah, so the play to earn. So what about in India, countries like India? How have they been using disruptive tech to revolutionize society?
We have been quite interested in India for the past 6 months so far, and I've been taking time to dive deep into ecosystem. I think India has succeeded in exporting its talent. And I remember I was talking to somebody, and I think there was a conversation where Bill Gates was talking to somebody and said, if we didn't go into India, somebody would build Microsoft and outcompete us. That's why we have to hire Indians. And if you look at the tech market today, in primarily, I could think of 15 Indian CEOs leading the top 50 companies in the world. Google, Microsoft, where else? A number of other companies. Maybe you
Banking
guys.
companies as well.
Right.
So, I mean, Singapore has a lot of Indian nationals who are serving at the top tier of a lot of their MNCs in Singapore. Now, one thing that India is really great at, apart from the talent, is it is ready for disruption, and they have used disruption in government. India is one of the first large, like 1/billion population country that has implemented digital ID at a sweep. So every Indian national has this little thing called the Aadhaar. Indonesia is also doing the same thing. And it's very interesting because the minute you get an Aadhaar, what Modi has done is, I want to send subsistence allowances out into the really rural parts of India. In the past, I needed people to go out, they needed to come to a bank or something like that, and there were a lot of leakages in the process. But today, I just send it into their Aadhaar wallet and ID, and they can use it. They can use it online. So he has, in one stroke, brought over 1 billion people into the digital economy. That is really powerful. And then that's where more Indians who are actually educated, a lot of Indians are very educated, leapfrog from that kind of platform, because now there is this 1/billion of people who understand digital needs. There are things in the digital space that need solutions for, and they understand it and they can build it. And now they are exporting talent.
That's interesting. And I like what we discussed before about, the innovation is happening in the US as well, and there's amazing tech coming out of there, but the adoption rate isn't as fast. And that is probably due to lack of education there, but also due to necessity in other parts of the world. These leapfrog effects where they go directly from maybe being unbanked to crypto, for example, because it solves a problem for them that maybe people in the US don't necessarily have, so they don't bother to get the education, or it's much slower. So one of the things that I'm seeing the common denominator is out of necessity, and also maybe that element of more control. Like in Dubai, they have much more sophisticated systems of ID, and they don't have passport agents stamping your passport. You just get your face scan and everything is done. So is that the common denominator here for like the fastness, also working with the government, being adopted faster and moving faster and innovating faster?
Okay, I'm just going to jump straight in. The reason why is because, like what Amir had previously talked about, they have already arrived, or they thought the Western innovators thought that they've already arrived at a state of comfort and to some extent complacency in innovation. And they were just hoping to push more adoption on what now is an inconvenient way of engaging technology. Whereas on the Asian side of things, where we have been seen to be backward, today there is technology, knowledge, democratization of technology and knowledge, thanks to the internet, to now leapfrog this entire process. I don't have to go through from step 1A, 1B, 1C to get to step 2. I can now go from step 1 to step 2, 2B, 2C, maybe even step 3, because I've already seen the entire process of what step 1 looks like. And I don't need to follow that because it doesn't suit my people. It's not for my culture. And my guys can do this a lot faster because community is behind it. So that's where
Community. I like that. James, did you want to weigh in on
I think two cents I can add is in the States or in Europe, innovation is kind of nice to have. Okay, you already have everything. It's just kind of on top of the status of quo, you can have some better services. But here in Asia, innovation solves real problems. In Indonesia, a lot of people don't have the bank account. So you need to have a very efficient way to open a bank account or solve the payment problems. In the States, everyone has a PayPal, everyone has a Apple Pay. Yeah. Ask people in Philippines, how many of them have credit card? So they need to solve the payment issues. So innovation is a real word here in Asia, not a nice to have stuff.
The comfy life you talked
𝐾𝐨𝐬𝐬.
about.
Yeah, I want to go back to India. I think if you take the entire talent of Indians working in the Silicon Valley and other parts of the world, put them back into India, they would be direct competitor to Chinese, number one. And number two, I remember the statement. The 19th century used to be imperial British. 20th century used to be more of the American. But the 21st century belongs to Asia for a number of reasons that we stated already. And to continue my thought, I think we are in a very interesting times. Now, it doesn't matter in terms of your ethnicity, in terms of your location, where you're based. As long as you have the access to the internet and a good team and some kind of creativity, you can easily disrupt any market, anywhere, anyhow. And that's what sort of fascinates me to be alive. And that's what fascinates me not to sleep at night and hustle. And when I talk to people from Asia Pacific or the Europe, I remembered about Estonia. Estonia, by far, the most digitally integrated government. And they have succeeded that in less than 25 years. And when I look at the Estonian example, their program called e-residency, they provide ease of use for non-residents to run the business. And we pay tax to Estonian government. And I think European Union has a lot to learn from Estonia. And I don't quite understand till this moment why European Union has not adopted Estonian approach in running the country, running the government, and making it easy for people and non-Europeans to somehow bring value to Europe. I think that's what China is good at: copying, re-innovating, re-implementing, localizing, and then applying to their nations.
Yeah, not reinventing the wheel, just copying what works and implementing that and executing on that, right? I think that's really interesting what you say about Estonia, because I'm from Los Angeles, but I live in Spain. So I see that happening, and I've been to events in Estonia, and it's like, Estonia? How's Estonia? This little country is disrupting everything, and it's, again, what you're talking about. They're making it easy, they're making it accessible, they're doing things to facilitate that instead of to stifle it, right? So, wow, this has been a really interesting conversation. To wrap up this panel, what are you guys' vision for the innovation happening out of Asia for these coming years, the next 5 to 10 years?
I think Asia is still learning a lot in terms of innovation from Europe, but adopting it faster, exporting backwards to European Union, North America. And number two, the amount of capital that is being generated in Asia Pacific is a lot larger, and they would be reinvesting to Europe or North America. That's the way we look at that. And third one, there are more and more talents that are coming out who are more innovative. They are directly competing with the Europeans and the Americans. And I think Asia Pacific is the next frontier based on what we have seen and what we have learned.
Interesting.
I can do that. So for me, I think innovation is a must, but please to be reminded that to do innovation, you cannot do it alone. Nobody is an expert. You might have the domain know-how, but I think me, Jasmine, or myself, or even Megan can be your good advisor or good helper on the journey of your innovation. So find a good partner, find a good supplier, your helper on the way of your innovation journey will be a best shot for you.
I like that.
So how I see innovation coming out of Asia is there's going to be a lot of community-driven solutions. And I always like to cite the example of ChatGPT and Bart or Sydney. ChatGPT was a community-driven solution. Then you have the two big 100-pound gorilla giants in the space, Microsoft and Google, who closed door, developed their own solution, and at unveiling, we all know who did a better job. So I truly believe that community-driven solutions and innovation will definitely take the trump. And because Asia has that in their DNA, and I'm praying really hard that we don't lose the community-driven DNA, the solutions that come out of Asia will take that leap forward.
Wow, that's so interesting, the community-driven tech. Like, that's so cool. And what Amir said about, like, this is a whole, it's a paradigm shift, right? It's like, it's not about gender, race, ethnicity, where you're from, where you're based. It's just somebody connected to the internet that can disrupt everything from anywhere, right? And take those principles that Asia is instilled by having the community lead and finding a good team to help you get your work done and finding advisors that understand and have the perspectives from these different parts of the world. If we were siloed and only focus on what's going on in our small community or in our country, then we can't make these changes happen that we want to see happen in the world. So this was absolutely incredible perspective, amazing panel. Thank you guys so much. It's been really awesome. And how about a big round of applause for our wonderful panelists, and enjoy the rest of the show.